Quick warning, this story does contain a tragic and brutal murder. You have been warned, baby. It's simple, it's safe, it can't harm anyone. So how did this happen? That email was full of lies and hearsay, and I'm disgusted that someone of reasonable intelligence could believe such shit. He wrote, "The things you called me were totally defaming. I sincerely hope you have insurance against lawsuits because you will need it." It's simple, it's safe, it can't harm anyone. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, just before we start, if you hear any additional sounds in this episode, I'm just warning you now, they're doing some building work above me right now, so, if you hear any hammers or, whatever, that's why that is. I'm in my French chateau this week, and I did go up and say to them, so I went up and I chapped on the door, and Claude, the manager, came to the door, and I said, "Look, Claude, could you keep it down, please? I am recording a podcast." And Claude said, what is a podcast? And I said, "No, Claude, it's called a podcast." And he said, "What is it?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of like a radio show that you do on the internet." And he said, "Sounds crazy. I do not listen to the podcast." So then Pierre, one of his workers, came over to see what was happening. And Claude said, "Pierre, we have to keep the noise down because Barry is on the internet today." And Pierre said, "I think everyone is on the internet, so shut up, Barry." So that's just what happened, and then they shut the door. So there you go. If you hear noise, it's because Claude and Pierre are hammering nails. Okay, this story. It's troubling. It is. But it is a celebration of strength. It might not feel like that to begin with, but it is. Okay, sweet cheeks, are you ready? Okay, let's go. When a body was discovered face down in shallow water, attempts were made to revive the body. Many attempts. The 15-year-old's body was seen floating by a passerby in the Port Elliot area in Australia. Her lifeless 15-year-old body was brought onto the beach and attempts at a resuscitation were made, but it was no use. She was dead. She had been battered. There was severe trauma to her face. An autopsy would later show she'd suffered 19 separate injuries to her young body. Sand would be found in her esophagus, and there was a trail of blood near where she'd been found floating. Her death was ruled as being caused by a combination of facial trauma, smothering, and drowning. It was never proven if she was dead or alive when she was put in the water. Now, this area where she was discovered is a beautiful, picturesque beach area where there's golden sands, blue water, and there's some really stunning little grassy hills to sit and look out over the water. Now, did this 15-year-old live in this part of Adelaide? No. She lived in Stirling, almost 40 miles away. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be on this beach. And there's no way that she should ever have been found dead in the water. So how did this happen? Well, when Sonya Ryan's daughter, Carly, got herself a MySpace account in the early 2000s, there was little knowledge of what this was and what this is. It was new. The internet was new. Do you remember when MySpace started? Nobody really knew what it was. You had Tom as your friend on there. I mean, none of us really understood what it was. And so, although Carly was 13 years old, Sonya, her mum, thought, well, it's okay because, her friends have got it. And really, it seems to be about homework and chatting with friends, and this seemed okay. Then came the day that the teenager turned to her mother and said the words, "I've met a boy online. His name is Brandon." Now, as a mother, Sonya will say she did immediately have her concerns, but she's also quick to say, we didn't really know enough then to be too worried. And she thought she could let Carly keep talking to this Brandon character. And, what Sonya would do is she would look over her daughter's shoulder sometimes just to see what she was doing online. And when she looked, now, I don't really remember this from MySpace. Maybe there's some MySpace listeners that might remember this, but apparently there used to be a little square in the corner, kind of like where you might, put a stamp. And it was like an image you would have on a loop, and it moved on a loop. It really just was a still image, but it would loop. And so when Sonya would look at this, she would see in the corner a teenage boy typing. So this was Brandon. Now, Brandon. Immediately, as soon as I heard that name, that jumps out at me as American straight away. And that's right. Brandon was an American, a Yankee, living in Australia with his family. Carly loved the fact that her online boyfriend was an American. Well, now she had to break an even worse bit of news to her mother. She was just turning 14. Brandon was 20. Now, that of course is going to give Sonya even more reason to pause. 20 years old is a wee bit old. So, this continues. Fine. She's going to let this continue. They live just as mother and daughter. It's just the two of them. Carly and Sonya are very, very close. They share everything. So in that way, Sonya feels like there's a safety within that. And she could really see the excitement in her daughter's face each time Brandon wanted to talk online and each time he said something nice to her. That was the Australian nice. Do you like that? Spelled Noice. Then a change happens. And Carly says to her mother, one day, I'd like to meet Brandon and I have the perfect opportunity. So it was going to be Carly's birthday and she was having a party. She told her mum what she'd like to do is invite her 20-year-old internet boyfriend to the party. And Sonya said, that's ridiculous. It's silly. Look, I know you've been chatting to him online, but meeting him? No. He's older. I just don't feel good about this. So mother and daughter, they fall out over this. And of course, teenager, you're going to hate your mother, aren't you? If she tells you that you can't see your boyfriend and where you can and can't go. And so Carly's on there and she's telling Brandon, it's so unfair. I really want you to come to my party. And then Brandon says, oh, well, I couldn't come to the party anyway because you see, I'm going overseas. However, Brandon says, what I'd really like to do, because I really like you, is I'd like to send someone from my family in my place so that that, I'm still thinking of you. It's really important to me that your birthday doesn't pass and we don't mark it in some way. So I would like to send someone from my family, my dad. Carly goes back to Sonya and says, look, Brandon isn't going to come, but his dad is going to come in his place. Sonya will say, of course this was fucking odd. Of course this was weird. But her daughter was so excited by it. So excited by the fact that she was going to meet her boyfriend's dad. Sonya goes along with it. She thinks, well, it's a party. I can kind of control the situation. So the day of the party arrives, and here comes Shane, Brandon's dad. He arrives at the party. Immediately, Sonya gets a weird feeling. She just does not like Shane at all. She sees him lingering his gaze on her teenage daughter. She sees a creep. Basically, she's like, he is a creepy bastard. There's something about it. Something just about this situation isn't right. Why would the 20-year-old boyfriend send his 50-year-old dad to a teenager's birthday party? Something is just way off here. So, because this story isn't really so much about the true crime element, well, it is, but it's much more about strength, and I'll clarify that later. Let's just cut to the chase. Brandon doesn't exist. Shane, who's at the party, isn't really Shane. He's a paedophile by the name of Gary Francis Newman. And he, at the point when he's at the party, has been grooming 15-year-old Carly for nearly 12 months online. Gary Francis Newman has over 200 different profiles across MySpace, and he uses those to meet teenage girls, get them to send pictures of themselves. He talks about sex with them. He is the kind of man you want to punch in the throat, punch in the face, punch in the dick, and then set fire to. Evil. Pure evil. And here he is at this party. So, posing still, of course, as the dad, as they all think he is, he asks Sonya if it might be okay if he stays in the house for a few days. He creates this bogus work situation. Sonya's like, I'm not sure about this. This weird guy wanting to stay in my house. I'm not sure about this. But Carly is very excited because she thinks, I can get to know my boyfriend's dad. Of course, what it's giving Gary is the chance to see Carly up close and as often as he likes. So he stays in the house, and it's during his stay that Sonya sits her daughter down at the kitchen table. And, you know, as I said, they're very, very close. She sits 15-year-old Carly down and she says, something isn't right here. Something's not right. And Carly says, okay, Mum, I believe you. I believe you that something isn't right. And if you're uncomfortable, let's ask him to leave. And so they do. So he packs up his stuff. Off he goes. He's not particularly happy about it, but off he goes. Sonya does not want him anywhere near her house. Once he's gone, Carly will tell her mother that during the time he had stayed in the house, he had tried to touch her and he'd asked her for sex. Sonya hits the roof. She fucking explodes. She emails him and she says if he ever goes anywhere near her daughter again, she'll call the police. He gets defensive and he says it's all a pack of lies. Why would he touch a young girl? Of course, caught in the middle of this, you've got Carly, who doesn't in any way really want to jeopardise the relationship with Brandon. I mean, this is why this is just such a messed up story, because this Brandon doesn't exist and Carly still thinks he does, and she thinks that she's upsetting Shane, who's not really Shane, and the mum doesn't know what the hell's going on. Oh. I mean, do you know, cannot believe the actual audacity of Gary Francis Newman to play the role of both the annoyed father and the supportive boyfriend. I mean, what the hell is that? When Sonya had emailed him to say Carly said that you touched her and basically if you come near her again I'll chop your balls off, he wrote back, bitch, that email was full of lies and hearsay, and I'm disgusted that someone of reasonable intelligence would believe such shit. The things you called me were totally defaming. I sincerely hope you will have insurance against lawsuits, because you will need it. I will go into court as a decorated SAS officer while you will go in as a child abusing bitch. Right, not only is it unacceptable that he said that in an email, it's completely unacceptable that he used the word bitch. This is just my personal feeling, but I can't stand it. I just hate the word bitch. I just have such struggles with it. And I feel like it keeps changing context. I feel like I keep hearing it in lots of different ways. It's Britney, bitch. But like, and now it's become like this kind of weird like male culture. I keep seeing it on like American like TV shows. Men saying to men, "You're bitch." Or maybe it's always existed and I've just never understood it in that way. Anyway, I just don't like it. So anyway, let's not get lost in that. Sonya tells her daughter, right, look, end this communication with Brandon. This all stops now because I'm so over it, right? We're just in nothing but trouble here. Just end it. And Carly says, okay, I will. Fine. If only that was the truth. Sonya's got no idea. Carly hasn't stopped the communication. Is still chatting to Brandon. It's just that she's got smarter about it. She's created different profiles that her mum doesn't know about. So sitting in his tiny, creepy bastard little home 40 miles away from Sonya and Carly, Gary Francis Newman is plotting how to lure Carly to her death. You see, he's decided he's going to fix Carly up, meaning kill her. He's so enraged by the fact that she went to her mother about the fact that he touched her, that his next step is to kill her. And so this is what he's sitting planning and plotting. This guy is such a prick. He even tries to get his own 17-year-old son involved. This is what he says to him. There's this little bitch. Oh my God, there's that word again. There's this little B word, and I'm going to fix her up. I need your help. His 17-year-old son is so disgusted by his father that he just leaves home. Now, back at Carly and Sonya's, telling her mother that she's going to spend the night with a friend just a few miles away. Carly leaves home, just a regular night, for what her mum thinks is a really nice night with her school friends. And it's the following morning that Sonya would receive the worst call that you can ever receive as a parent. Carly's lifeless body had been dragged out of the shallow water 40 miles from her home. CCTV footage would show that Carly had been in the small town of Port Elliot the evening before she was found with 3 different men. One of them was Gary Francis Newman. They'd gone into pubs, they'd gone in for some food, and finally they'd ended up at the beach. Remember I talked about those little grassy hills at the beach where you could sit and watch the water? Well, at some point the 3 men and Carly had sat there, and there was a young woman out running. And as she passed by, she sort of noticed the 15-year-old Carly with these 3 older men. And she asked Carly if she was okay. She thought it was odd that this 15-year-old would be there and sitting on that beach, but Carly nodded her head and said she was okay. Obviously she wasn't. Sonya says, I don't know what she went through on that beach. I know they found sand in her esophagus. I know her face was beaten. And I know that she had multiple injuries on her body, but I don't think I want to know everything that she went through in her last minutes, because I don't think I could handle it. Between the autopsy and detectives and pieces of the story, it's believed that what happened is Carly tried to spurn the advances of the men, and that Gary Francis Newman, in a rage, forced her head down onto the sand, pushed her head in until she choked on sand. Then he beat her around the face and threw her body in the water, and then the 3 men left. So I said the story was about strength, and I meant that. It's Sonya's strength I want to talk about. Carly was the first, I repeat, the first Australian citizen ever to be killed by an online predator. And this was only in the early 2000s. This had just happened. There was no blueprint for what to do in this situation, but it's her mother Sonya who's going to design that blueprint. What she does next is just amazing. She says this: a future without Carly is just too terrifying to imagine. Like someone has switched off the light that she brought into our lives. Now you can either fall into that blackness and completely give up, or you can step into the light and do what you can. And that's trying to help others. She says, what else do I have? It's pretty much the only choice I have. And this is where her energy goes. First of all, she makes sure that all of the 200 profiles used by her daughter's killer are taken down from the internet, and that warnings are sent to all of those parents whose children might have been in contact with this man, not knowing that that's who they were actually chatting with. From here, she takes on the big one, the internet. Not an easy beast to challenge, but she did. Across Australia, she campaigns for internet safety. for parental controls, for transparency about who's chatting with who online. She then embarks on an Australian-wide tour of schools where she goes to each school individually to share Carly's story and to warn kids and to warn parents about the dangers. Now, Sonya will say here, she has balance. She's not a complete hater of the internet. In fact, she thinks the internet's great. But, like all of us, she just hates the darker and the more dangerous areas. From here, she goes on to create an app called Thread. And this is an app that parents and kids can use to check in with each other. It's not like a tracking device as such, but what it is you can open the app, and what it does is it quickly works out your location, and the simple click of a button you can send someone your location without having to, you don't have to send text messages, you don't have to do any of that. You just basically click something on the app and it lets someone else know exactly where you are, so that's pretty good. But this is the most important bit of it, and this is what Sonya really wanted. It's also got a function which alerts police that you are in danger without having to call and speak to anyone. So it's heartbreaking. It is really heartbreaking, but Sonya says if Carly on that beach had just been able to hit a button on her phone to let police know that she wasn't safe, she'd probably still be here. Because of course, a teenager with 3 adult men is going to be too scared to call the police. So from there, she goes on to establish the Carly Ryan Foundation, which today has hundreds of employees and projects all across Australia. Again, it's all just using Carly's story to educate about safety and offer young people a place to come when they don't feel safe online. Now that is a lot that she did, and that was just in the few years after Carly's death. But Sonya wasn't finished. She wanted a law passed, and she wanted it to be called Carly's Law. And so she began to campaign. Now, first of all, she met with local government and then national government, until she had worked her way to the top of the tree, and she sat face to face with the Australian Prime Minister, and she told him that she wanted a law passed in her daughter's name. And she got it. Carly's Law. It allows police to act much quicker and much more efficiently if there's even a hint of an online predator. And what the law has resulted in is millions, literally millions, of cases of catfishing, stalking, fake profiles, predatory behaviour, all of that being stopped in its tracks before it gets to a serious situation. And it's all of those reasons that Sonya needs applauded, because the fight that she's had to make these things happen has been huge. Sonya would go on to win Australian of the Year. Sonya says none of this will bring Carly back, but in some ways I feel she's here with me when I do this work. And so ends the story. Okay, right, there we go. Another strong woman for you. Yeah, if you've got 10 minutes, I would look up Sonya Ryan. She's great. She's dead engaging. She's so good. I also think the thing about her as well that I really admire, because I jumped from kind of watching this interview to that interview and clips about it. And you know, the thing is, it's like she says in her own story, what choice have you got? You either fall into the darkness of that or you push forward. And those words are great to say, right? But in the pushing forward, what it means for her is on a daily basis, she has to relive the horror of what happened to her daughter. And that, I think, is, another reason to kind of celebrate her, because, she goes out there and she tells that story. Anyway, we've come to the end. As always, get in touch, let me know your thoughts. I suppose I better maybe go and take, what were they called? Frank and Pierre and Jean-Claude, whatever they're called. Better go and take them a cup of tea and apologise for being rude. Okay, hope you enjoyed the podcast on the internet radio. And yeah, see you soon. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.